epic guest speaker for today. Fab, I'm so pleased to introduce you all to Day Strong. Day is the Global Head of Talent Acquisition Operations, Programs, and Early in Career at Cisco Meraki. She's got a huge amount of experience, over 21 years in talent acquisition, and I think over 14 of those years in leadership alone. Day, it's so great to have you with us. I'd love to kick off if you could just tell us a little bit more about you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's definitely an honor to be able to present and talk with you all today. So like she said, I am, quite, even though despite my young looking face, I have over 20 years in talent acquisition. Started in agency recruiting and grew my way into corporate recruiting and into leadership. I am a huge foodie. I love to cook. I do a lot of cooking. I also love sports. I think in the UK you guys call it soccer. Here we call it football.
We do.
So this is my coffee mug is a cheesehead. So I'm a Green Bay Packer girl, football. And then I travel. I love to travel. I have plans to go to Ghana this year. So I am super excited. I'm hoping COVID will let me be great and go. So that is my big trip that I have planned this summer, but I definitely do travel a lot as well. So, but I'm excited to be here today to talk about new year, new job.
Amazing. Thanks, Day. It's so great to hear a bit more about you. And we're going to be talking a bit just around kind of recruiting and getting the right role, but also aligning, a role with really what your personal motivations are. And we're seeing such a huge rising trend in job seekers being a lot more selective about where they choose to work. And also we're currently experiencing the great resignation with people kind of just dropping out left, right, and center. So I'd love to kind of kick off by asking, I guess, how do you think people can narrow down and determine what companies are most likely to be an aligned fit for them? Where do they start?
Absolutely. Great question. So I would say the first thing is, where do you want to work? Figure out what industry is the industry that closely ties to whatever you have, whatever you care about, whatever you're passionate about. So whether that's healthcare, whether that's tech, retail, fashion, you name it, figure out what industry first that you would love to work in. Then once you figure that out, then what are the top companies within those industries? Go to Google, search, figure out which companies are the top in those industries that you have interest in, making sure that they're in the locations that you also want to work in. And then go and start doing your research. Go to their career websites, take a look at their career page, look at the about page so you can learn about the company, understand their values, their mission. And if those things align, then of course, take a look at the careers to see if they have any opportunities that are of interest to you. Also check them out on LinkedIn. Go to Glassdoor, see what others are saying about them. And then that'll help you narrow down your search. And then hopefully you'll find some career opportunities that align to what you're looking for, and then you can apply to those jobs that way.
Amazing. And I know like we've talked about sort of organizational values and personal values as well. I thought it'd be useful to kind of just chat a bit about how to align those values for an individual that's looking, and actually, because a lot of corporate values tend to be quite vague and it's really difficult to kind of assess what that really means in terms of behavior. But if you are looking for a company, just thinking about the values aspect, are there any kind of tips that you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was a company that had great benefits and ability to do community, give back and volunteer within the community, because I do that on my own personal time now. So when I was looking, when I was on the market for a little bit over 3 years ago, I was really looking for a company that kind of aligned with some of those things that I had that were important to me. So I looked at Cisco Meraki was one of the companies, and they offer something called emergency time, which I was just like, okay, tell me more about this emergency time. Something can happen, I have older parents, something can happen to my parents. And instead of me being stressed about personal time, also my PTO, my vacation time, it gives me this emergency time. I don't have to tap into that. I can use emergency time to go and take care of my parents or whatever the emergency could be. We have a lot of fires in Northern California that it gives me emergency time off if I have to evacuate and things of that nature. So I was like, okay, check, that's one. Then when I started, the company used to give us 40 hours of volunteer time off. Now, since the pandemic has hit, they give us 80 hours of volunteer time off. So this is
Oh,
separate. Yeah, exactly. Separate from my, once again, paid time off, personal time off. It's separate from that, separate from emergency time off. This is additional time off I can take to go and do volunteer work within the community that I enjoy to do. And then they also do like matching. So if I am donating to a cause like Black Lives Matter, for example, they match those dollars that I donate. So it's those are some of the things that I truly valued and it aligned with me. So that was one of the many reasons that I decided to join Cisco Meraki versus all the other companies I was interviewing with.
amazing, because that was such a huge personal value for you, and having that opportunity. So getting that, and I know, I think we were chatting about this the other day, like, you know, you had so many different job offers at the time, and it'd be good to understand what was the differentiating factor while you were kind of being headhunted.
Yeah, well, the values was one. And then also just for me, it was about where am I going to be able to go, grow my career, and also have work-life balance. That was super important to me. And the other companies that I was interviewing with, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to get that work-life balance. I just had a feeling based on some of the perks, like one company had hoteling on their property. And I was just like, why would you have hoteling on your property that you offer your employees that are local?
Right.
Well, they,
Don't
I'm
go
like,
home, stay here.
exactly. And then they had all the perks. I mean, you can get your nails and toes done or your pedi and manicures. You could get your hair cut. They had cleaners and they had all of these amenities. And I was just like, hmm, something is telling me that I'll be working literally 80 hours a week. So
Yeah.
I was just like, I think this might not be the best solution for me. Even though it was a great company, don't get me wrong. I just felt like I wasn't going to get that work life balance, which I really wanted at this stage of my career.
That makes absolute sense. And is there a process of elimination, I guess, or anything that you'd kind of would come up as a sort of red flag first when you're going through that search?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important that, they're interviewing you as a candidate, right? But I think a lot of times candidates forget that you should be also interviewing them. And so you should understand what things are important to you, whether it's the flexibility, whether it's time off, definitely compensation is always going to be up there. But also tell me a little bit about you as a leader. How do you lead? What is going to be my day one experience like? What is the onboarding, in this role? Is there any training provided? What are the expectations within 30, 60, 90 days for me? What keeps you here? Why, how have you grown your career? What type of leader are you? Do you have an open door policy? How is the best way to communicate with you? Talk to me a little bit about the team. Asking those type of questions because that's going to help you determine, is this going to be the right environment for you.
Mm.
um if you don't want to just be thrown in, here's your laptop, good luck, and that's what they're telling you is your experience.
Majority of companies these days.
Right, but this is probably not going to be the right job, so it's really important for you to understand the things that you want in your career, the things that are super important to you from your employer. And then once you know what that is, ask those questions because that's going to help you evaluate and determine, is this the right company? And then you can easily bow out earlier in the game than versus wasting your time and their time going through the entire process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So thinking now that, okay, you've probably got an ideal kind of company hit list, you've kind of looked at whether there's an alignment in terms of what you're looking for in terms of values, and get some sort of indication as to whether they're a great fit for you. But the real challenge is getting noticed, and the market is extremely competitive. So in your experience, are there any kind of ways that you can stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have narrowed down those companies that are of interest to you, go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your best friend, seriously, because you will see if you have mutual connections that work for those organizations, or maybe they're tied to someone that works at those organizations, and they can help you get your foot in the door. So use your connections to help you get your foot in the door. Also research the company and see if you can identify who the hiring manager is. I know a lot of times you all like to reach out to recruiting. We're not always your best first stop. I would encourage you to highly try to figure out who the hiring manager is. So if you're interviewing or you're wanting to interview for the software engineer role, for example, look to see who the engineer managers are within those organizations. So then you can reach out to them and provide them with a very short, but very detailed like notes that tells them who you are, why you want to work for them, how you think you can add value to their organization. And LinkedIn has it now where you can do videos. I would encourage you to do a video message. Try to do something that sets yourself, above the rest, and get their attention. So definitely use LinkedIn to narrow down the ability to target who the hiring managers are, as well as see if your connections, if you have any connections that are tied to those companies.
Fab. So using LinkedIn to kind of narrow down who the hiring managers are, and also thinking about how you tailor that message. And I can imagine, because you must get so many messages all the time, are there kind of any tidbits on how to kind of craft that message to get noticed or get a response?
Yeah, it's so funny. Before today's conversation, I was on LinkedIn, sharing, come join me to join this conversation, and I had some messages in there. Definitely, one of my messages, it was like I can't even tell you how long it was. It was super long, and I'm like, who has time to read this? So do not send something that's super long. You could be saying something really good in there, but it's so long. I'm so busy. I don't have time to read. So I'm like trying to skim and get to what is it that you need from me. Um, and I'm one of those people, I'm nice. So 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna sit there and try to read and try to help you. But the shorter and the more concise you are, the more you're gonna get from me. When it's super long, I'm probably gonna tell you, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I
Yeah.
don't even know what this is about. So just make sure it's short and concise. You want to go get to the point. You want to have a little fluff, but don't. Oh, your background is so amazing, and I know what my background is. What can I do for you?
Yeah.
Why are you reaching out to me? So definitely short and concise is the key.
Great. And do you think it's worth reaching out? I know, because LinkedIn has so many different tools that you can access, I guess. But is it worth also looking at employees within those organizations or connections? But if you don't, it's I guess my question is more, if you don't have a personal relationship with those employees, is it still worth kind of utilizing that?
Yeah, because people reach out to me all the time that I have no idea who they are. I don't know them at all, but they're connected to me somehow. Whether and typically like a level two, because it's like your levels. Ones are people who you've already said, I want to follow, they can follow me. We're connected. Then the two is we're somehow connected. Either we went to the same school, we've worked at the same place before. That gives you the different levels. I think they go all the way to level 3 or 4 in LinkedIn. Don't quote me on that. But so it doesn't matter how you find this person, you can definitely do an introduction and establish and let them know you would like to connect with them as well. To be able to reach out to them and create and develop a relationship, a virtual relationship with them, have virtual coffee, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you know the person or not. I encourage you to do it, but just make sure you're wise about who you're reaching out to and making sure that the message isn't too long.
Amazing. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I guess then coming back to interviews, so you've kind of found the job, you've probably reached out to a recruiting manager, you've tried to make some connections. But when it comes to interviews, I'm sure you've conducted your fair share. But have you got any stories of people who've made a standout first impression when you did interview them?
Yeah, definitely. I will tell you the keys to stand out is, let's start at the very beginning. When they reach out to you to get yourself scheduled for a conversation, ensure that you're providing them with really good days and times that you're available. I had a candidate yesterday. I said, "What days and times can I reach out to you?" And she gave me one day and an hour. I was like, "Oh, okay." This is like, give me all the days and all the times, except for the weekends. I have people who will say, "Oh, you can talk to me on Saturday," and I'm like, "Who works on the weekend?" I do not. But then this morning, I had a young man who responded to me and said, "I can reach out to him any day this week between these hours," and I'm like, "Yes, this is great." So ensure that you're providing them with ample days and times in which you can, be reached for an interview. So that's number one. Number two, be prepared when you're coming to this interview. Most interviews are, behavioral based. So tell me about a time when. It's super important that you're able to give them relevant responses. Answer the question. That is going to be key to a successful interview. And if you can't draw from something that's super relevant, you can say, "This has been years ago, but this is what happened, to answer this question." Or maybe you're earlier in your career and so you haven't had exposure to the situation, so you should be really honest and let them know, "I haven't quite had this experience as of yet, but if that were to happen to me, this is how I would handle it, and this is the reasons why I would choose this route." So they can kind of get an idea of, because what they're looking for is your judgment, how you're able to handle a problem solve or conflict or things of that nature. So even if you haven't experienced something, if you can draw from what you think you might do in that type of situation, that'll help benefit you as well. And
That's
then
a really great tip.
finally,
Sorry?
yeah. And then I said, finally, just make sure you have questions to ask. Ask really good questions that's going to help you decide if this is the employer for you. So make sure you have some really good questions to ask at the end.
I really like that tip on when you don't have the answer, thinking about actually suggesting a scenario, what you think you might do. Because often
Mhm.
we're so panicked in interviews and people, you kind of just go in and either you'll give a completely wrong answer that's complete lies, or you will completely forget and have nothing to say. So being able to give that scenario, I think, is a really good option. And when we then look at sort of offer stages, can you share any tips on how to get the best offer and negotiate, but without making a negative impression? Because that's
Yes.
the constant fear.
Yes, that is a fear, right? Salary is so tricky. Like, we want to get the most money, but we're so scared to ask for it most times. We're like super nervous because we don't want them to, say no, thank you. And if they do say that to you because of salary, you have to think to yourself, "Well, this wasn't the right organization for me." So that's number one. But what I would say to you, my advice is never give a dollar amount. Like, hold out till you can't hold out anymore and giving them a number. Never give them a number. So the first call is typically from a recruiter and they're asking you about your skills, why are you interested, yada yada. You're going through the spiel, and then they always ask you, "So what are your salary requirements?" Your response should be, "Well, what is the range for this position?" Return and flip it back around on them and have them give you a number. I know in United States, we are required in the state of California, if they ask us what the salary range is, we have to give it to them. So understand the laws where you live as well, because when you ask the question, they may have to give it to you. So when you flip it back on them and ask them what the range is, they can tell you, "Oh, well, yes, well, the range for this position is 100,000 to 130,000 USD." And then you can say to yourself, "Perfect," because when you had the number in your head and you wanted 120, let's say, so you're within the range. So
Yeah.
that's your response. "I'm within the range." That's great. So you never give them the dollar amount. You never said what you wanted. You just told them you were within the range. And so great. So now they know that 100 and 130, you're in the range, perfect. So they move forward. It gets to the time for the offer. And so they told you the range was 100 to 130. You said you were within the range. You get the offer, and let's say the offer is 110,000, but that's 10,000 less than what you were expecting. So you just let the recruiter know, or the hiring manager know, whoever it is that's extending the offer to you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for, giving me the opportunity to interview and extending this wonderful opportunity to me. 110 is not quite what I was looking for. When we talked, you said salary was between 100 to 130, and I really was wanting 120. Is the salary negotiable? That's when you give your dollar amount, right, at the offer. And they'll tell you, oh, yes, because I did tell you that it was 100 to 130. You want 120. They typically can't answer right away because they have to go back to make sure that they get the approvals. But sometimes they do. Sometimes recruiters can have the leeway to offer you the entire amount within that range that they gave you. So that's the good scenario. Then you have the other flip where they're like, no, 110 is what it is. Even though they gave you a salary range, oftentimes companies have budgets, and the budgets dictate how much they can pay. So even though the job salary range is 100 to 130, the budget for this role is maxed at 110. So you could come back to a situation where they can't go up. And if they can't go up, that's when you have to determine, are you willing to take this job, or do you want to say thank you, but no thank you? At the end of the day, I know salary is super important. Just make sure you're not giving out a number, and never tell them what you're currently making, because what you make today should not dictate what you make tomorrow. So never share that. I mean, the person that's getting 110,000 could literally be making 80,000 right now. That doesn't mean that that person isn't worth or feel like they're valued at 120. So never dictate or never disclose what you're currently making.
Okay.
Always talk about what it is that you want to make.
Love that. And I guess, I know I've been in situations before where you've got the salary range sounds fine, but then the offer that you get is kind of right at the very beginning of that range. And in many cases, when you're kind of going through that negotiation phase, a company will say, well, we can't do that now. However, we will promise an increase, whether it's within 6 months or within a year. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know I've definitely been in the position where I've been told that, and then it's never materialized, and it's become an issue later on. So is it more important to kind of get that right up front, or is it worth kind of considering that the later increase to the amount that you want?
Yeah, if you can get it up front, I'd say get it up front. But if they tell you, well, when you're done with probationary period, we will then give you the additional 10,000, 15,000, whatever it is. Okay, but let's get that in writing. Let that be a part of my offer letter. Okay, so I know that I'm going to be getting this money after my probationary period, and I want to make sure that I fully understand too what's expected of me within those 30, 60, 90 days, so I can achieve that. And so at the end of those 90 days, I am getting that the additional 10, 15, whatever the dollar amount is, added to my salary. So get that in writing. If they're not going to give it to you in writing, I would tell you that I would be very cautious before I would move forward. And then making sure that I'm very comfortable with whatever, if I do accept that offer, whatever I'm making at the very beginning, because it's highly likely
Think
that
that's
I'm
the
not
key.
gonna get, that I'm not gonna get that extra 10 or 15 or whatever I thought I was going to get. So yeah.
I think it's such a balance when it's, an organization that is a dream organization maybe, or somewhere where you'd really, really love to work,
Yep.
and finding the balance between one, kind of all the work you've put in to get to that stage, to then be given,
Yes.
what's considered a low ball offer, for example, but
And
also
that's
I
how
guess
they get
exploring
you.
the benefits. Yeah, because
Right.
some
And that's
benefits are
exactly,
far
yeah.
outweigh the salary in some cases.
Exactly. That's exactly how they get you. And your salary, your compensation package is totality of things. It's not just your base salary. Understand if you get bonuses within your comp. Like I know where I work, we get bonus, and we get bonus paid out twice. We get it paid out in the Q2, Q3 timeframe, and we also get it paid out in Q1 timeframe. So you get it paid out twice. So understand what the bonuses are, understand what the benefits are from a medical standpoint. How much do they pay of your medical benefits? Understand 401k matching, if there's pension, if there's stock options, all of that. Or maybe better yet, they can't give you the money, but maybe they can give you a sign-on bonus. So the 15,000 difference or the $10,000 difference, maybe they can give that to you in a sign-on bonus. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. Definitely do not be afraid. And I know it's nerve-wracking. Trust me, I have been there, but don't be afraid to ask what you want, because once you're there, it's super hard sometimes to increase your salary the way that you desire. Typically, you have to leave and go somewhere else and then maybe come back to get the money that you want. So that's why it's important to try to do it up front.
Great. No, that's really good. I hope everyone's listening to make sure to get it in writing, but also make the right choice for you. And we kind of talked about finding the right organization, getting noticed, exploring a bit of the kind of interview techniques and negotiating a really good offer. But what happens when there isn't a job advertised at your kind of dream company? And just thinking about speculative applications, in your experience, have you seen people successfully get hired through that? And do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a great story for this, because I hired someone who reached out to me. So I had a recent college grad. She reached out to me and said how she wanted to get her foot in the door in HR, specifically recruiting. And she liked my background and wanted to spend 10 minutes talking with me to see how I got my start, to see if I could give her any tips. And I said, sure, I will give you your 10 minutes. Scheduled the call, spoke with her, really liked her energy, and enjoyed the conversation with her. Then I really started to ask her some questions to really understand why recruiting, why do you have interest, what have you done, like where have you worked, have you had any internships, tell me about your coursework, those type of questions. And at the end, of course, 10 minutes turned into 40 minutes. And I said to her, well, Teresa, what if I tell you you're hired?
Wow.
And she screamed, she cried, and she said, are you playing with me? And I told her, no, I'm not. I literally was hiring for a coordinator, and it was a contract opportunity. And through my questioning with her, I asked her, would she be open to contract? Because sometimes you do have to start contract so you can get some experience, and then maybe you can turn it into a full-time job. So I hired her as a contract recruiting coordinator. She worked for me for 6 months, and she did really well. She was a really good, very dedicated, very detailed, great communication. She did everything well and everything right. So much so that I was trying to get her like exposure into other areas within recruiting to get her some experience. And she got recruited out. We lost her. She got recruited out by another company in the Bay Area. And I was so proud of her because she told me, she was like, I think I really want to be a recruiter. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. And I was like, well, let me make sure I get you some additional exposure, some different additional experience. I said, we don't have anything right now, but if something opens up, you just never know. And then she said, well, a recruiter reached out to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did they? And she was like, yes. I said, oh my God, well, how can I help you? I'm one of those leaders that's always going to try to encourage you. I don't want you to leave me, but I don't want to prevent you from growing your career either. Her and I still stay in contact. I do plan to do the boomerang and get her back as soon as I have an opportunity, trust me. But yeah, I mean, now she's a recruiter, and I'm glad that I was able to help her just gain some experience to get her to where she ultimately wanted to be, which is a recruiter.
I love that. It's odd because I find organizations often, really encourage kind of speculative applications, but you don't really hear success stories from that. And the fact that you have the success story where you actually hired somebody on the spot. And how did she reach out to you?
LinkedIn.
Literally following the tips that you've just mentioned, and getting that role, which is amazing. And the fact that you were able to then help her as she was getting headhunted for a different role is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always going to encourage the team if I can't, especially when you're a contractor, I fully understand when you're able to get a full-time employment somewhere. So I 100% get it. And she told me immediately, and I appreciated that because that also allowed me to be proactive and try to find someone to replace her, just in case she got the job. She got the job. I was able to replace her pretty quickly as well. So it was a win-win, even though we lost her. But like I said, her and I definitely, I talked to her over the holidays. We still keep in contact with each other.
Amazing. I think that's phenomenal, especially because it's odd. I feel like with the pandemic, it almost feels like people are a lot more open to helping and to conversations, and kind of that outreach on LinkedIn, for example, seems to be a lot more likely to get a response from people. So really kind of utilizing that and not kind of getting stuck in your shell or your own imposter syndrome of thinking you won't be able to get the role, or they
Yep.
might completely dismiss you. And actually, this is just great encouragement that it can happen, and to go for what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And imposter syndrome is real. I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome. I had one of my own direct reports told me, "You are suffering from imposter syndrome." But I'm like, "What am I?" And I literally had to like take a step back and say, "He right. He is so right. I can do this." And sometimes you need that. You need someone who tells you that you are capable of taking the next steps. Even if you're self-doubting yourself, and it's good to have those type of people in your corner. And I'm, fortunate that he works directly for me. And I was just bouncing something off of him, and he was like, "Yeah, don't do that." And I was like, I don't think. And he was like, "Imposter syndrome." He called me right out on it. It's real.
uh, you need that kind of support, and that confidence, I think, because we all suffer from it at different stages. So being able to
Yep.
have that along the journey is a great reminder.
Yep.
And I'd love to know, what are the most important qualities that you look for in a future employee, and why?
Yeah, so communication is key. You need someone who's able to articulate what it is that they want, what they're doing, the how, the why, and that's verbal and written, especially in recruiting. It is super important. Someone that is a team player. Team player is like key. Is actually a part of our values at Cisco Meraki. One of our values is everyone in. And I mean, can you imagine you're new, you're not really sure what to do, and then you feel like you're on an island by yourself? That is not the type of environment we want. Or you're just bogged down in work. Have you ever been that employee? You're just treading water and you're like getting ready to drown and no one's there to save you. We are here. We will literally throw you the life jacket and pull you to shore or lift you up. Um, so that's the type of environment, we have where I work. And so team player is super important within our culture. Someone who is ambitious, is a go-getter. I want to develop people. I don't want you to be a coordinator for the rest of your life. I want you to grow. How can I help you do that? As a leader, it's my responsibility to make sure that you have the tools, and to make sure that I'm giving you the motivation and encouragement and there to help ground you from point A to point B. So that's super important to me as well.
Amazing. And I think it's with being the team player, it's a really good one, because I think most organizations want that, but I like the differentiation that you've put in actually being able to support people who are up to their eyeballs or are really stressed out, as well as also being a team player and being able to lead. So that's a really good kind of way of looking at it in terms of thinking about responses, that you might
Yeah.
give when people ask that question. And we'll be coming up to Q&A in a bit. So guys, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. But before we do, I've got a couple more for you.
Okay.
Love to know, what's the biggest risk that you've taken in your career, and why?
Yeah, I would say I don't think of them as risk. I definitely just think of them as opportunities and learnings. I went to school, got a degree in my bachelor's degree in journalism. My goal was to be, on the news, giving you your evening news, and then maybe on the sidelines at a sporting event, giving you the updates on the game. That was like a goal of mine. And then I literally switched gears because I was like, I don't I don't want to have to move around and live like all these places. And then what do I end up doing? Moving around and living in a whole bunch of places.
Yeah.
Who would have thought so? But I took all of these risks. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a very small town in the United States. I left there and went to Washington, D.C., which was big city, huge diversity. Like Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of diversity. DC is like the melting pot. I have friends from every background. It was like the best experience. And I'm so appreciative that I did that. I'm just like, I'm glad I took that chance and did it. And I was there for a very long time. Well, not a very long time. I was there for about 3 years. And then I left because it was so expensive. And I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, which is south in the United States. I didn't really like it. It was very country and slow. So I was like, okay, where to go next? And I wasn't afraid to literally pack it all up and just move until I find my sweet spot. My parents relocated to Las Vegas, Nevada. And so I went out there. I don't really like that either. I was there for like 4 years though. And I worked for Citigroup. And Citigroup relocated me from Vegas to Dallas. And I actually love Dallas. And I was there for 10 years. And I decided to leave Dallas because I couldn't get my parents to relocate to Texas and I wanted to be closer to them. So here I am in the Bay Area. Now I work for Cisco Meraki. But these were all opportunities for me to literally meet different people, have so many different experiences, different cultures. I mean, it's different from the Midwest to the East to the South to the West. Very different. It's all the United States, but super different. So it definitely gave me different exposures to things. And, definitely, I guess there are risks associated with that, but I didn't think of them as risks. It was definitely learning opportunities and it exposed me to so much. It really has. And I've worked for some great companies in being able to be so nimble and move around into different locations.
Amazing. And when you did make those moves, with the exception of when Citigroup kind of relocated you, did you
Yeah.
already have a role kind of lined up in those cities, or did you just kind of go, right, I'm moving, I'm changing direction, I want to do something different, get there, and then try and figure it out?
Yeah. So when I left Milwaukee, moved to DC, I had no job. And my goal, my goal was to get a job at BET because BET is headquartered in Washington, D.C. So I was like, I am going to get a job at BET. And this is so long ago, you guys. This is definitely going to age me because this is the time where you can literally go knock on BET's door and fill out an application.
Okay.
So this is during this time frame. And I used to stalk them, like literally, because that was my goal was to work there. And I ended up working for a temp agency and BET was a customer. Could you
Okay.
imagine? So it was almost, I was almost there, but I didn't quite make it. But yeah, so I had no job in DC. When I moved to Atlanta, I did have a job. When I moved to Vegas, I did not have a job. When I moved to Texas, of course, Citibank took me. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, yes, I had a job. Who can move to the
Amazing.
Bay Area without a job? I don't know. It's too expensive for those shenanigans. So yes, I had a job coming out here.
I think one of the beauties now is just remote working and being able to, in many cases, actually just hop off and move and continue doing your job. So it's a
Yep.
much different kind of landscape,
Yes.
but still great risks. And I think it's really good to be able to take that risk and not be afraid of getting those roles.
Yep.
And before kind of we come to audience questions, you're a senior leader, you've worked in kind of talent acquisition, and essentially have done all things people, from recruitment to DEI to project management, operations. And looking back on your career, what do you think has influenced you the most in a positive way along that journey?
Yeah, I will tell you the best part of what I've done in my career is working in an agency. The agency was my really first true recruiting role. And working at the agency taught me sense of urgency. It taught me customer service. It taught me how to sell and how to build strong relationships. And I've been able to take that skill set that I learned working in that tip agency. The agency was called Access. I think they're Randstad now, but they were called Access when I lived in DC. And they taught me all of those skills from just working there. And of course, all of my colleagues, I have some amazing colleagues that I work with. And they taught me all of that, which I've been able to transfer all of those good qualities into every job that I've had. In every role that I've had, all of my leaders have always said they know that I'm going to be the first to respond. So, sense of urgency. They know that I know everyone because I build strong relationships. And these are things that have definitely helped me be super successful in my roles and actually has helped me grow my career. I never thought that I was going to be a leader. I loved recruiting. And even though I'm a senior leader, I still recruit. I love recruiting. Like that is my passion. But I never wanted to be a leader. And when I worked at Citigroup, my leader's leader, so the head of TA, told me that I was going to be a leader and I was going to like it. And I was just like, what? I was so scared and nervous. And she was like, well, what do you want to do with your career? I was like, well, I was just a recruiter. So I thought the next step would be senior recruiter. And she said, okay, well, what about after that? Executive recruiter? And she was like, oh my God, Dave Strong, I need you to think about leadership. And I was like, I don't want to be a leader. And look at me today. I thank her so dearly for that because she did not have to, she pushed me. She pushed me and forced me at the same time. And I took the opportunity. I stepped out on faith. And luckily I had her. She was a really strong, great leader at Citigroup. And luckily I had her and my boss to help, encourage me and be there for me, to coach me, because you need that. Anytime you're going into any type of new role, you need that backing to help support you, especially when you're new to role. You need that backing to help support you. And I've just been fortunate to have some really strong leaders in my path.
Amazing. Thank you. That was really great to hear. And we kind of covered everything from, tips on how to find the right companies, thinking about your personal values, thinking about actually how to build relationships with recruiters, but also employees that may work in those organizations, standing out within interviews, looking at kind of offer, and also just some of your kind of own personal successes and tips along the way. I'd love to hear any audience questions, so please do pop them in the chat. I'm just going to start going through them now before we close. So bear with me 1 second. I've got a question here from Jordan. So should you include non-work related achievements on your CV? So for example, professional sporting competition. Professional sporting or other awards that are not necessarily related, maybe related to charity work, such as Duke of Edinburgh Awards, expeditions done, that type of thing.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. Especially when you're earlier in your career. When you're older in your career, then at that stuff that's from a long time ago, I would say no. Your resume should be like 10 years worth of history. So yes, I often see within our emerging talent team, so this is our early in career applicants, they have that they were on the varsity team or they were the captain, within the sports, or they would volunteer charity work that they've done. Absolutely include that. If you're in a sorority, fraternity, include all of that stuff, because what that shows us is that you can make commitments, that you have leadership and coaching capabilities. It shows a lot of stuff. So yes, include that on your resume.
And do you think that it matters, if you're kind of past maybe entry level or past, experienced hire, maybe 2 to 5 years, if you're in a more kind of management / senior roles, do you think some of those achievements are still worth including when you're a bit further down the line?
Yes, if it's within 10 years. If it's within 10 years of history, I say yes. If it's outside of 10 years, then I say, yeah, no, don't put it on there, because you want to make sure also that your resume isn't going into 3 pages. Try to keep your resume at 1 page if possible. 2 pages is the max. So if you're starting to go 3, 4 pages, you got to make some cuts, and that's where you're going to make the cut.
Great. I hope that answers your question. And there's a not a question here, but a comment actually from Xanatol around the fact that they write speculative messages to hiring managers, mainly COOs, and get a bunch of leads doing that. But they definitely find that email is a lot better, as not everyone checks their LinkedIn. So that's a useful comment to know. Thank you. We like to explore challenges. Okay, I've got a comment here from Somi, saying that they're a young lawyer, graduated and started their career in July 2021, I'm assuming. Currently working in a law firm, but not comfortable with the pay, and would really like to explore opportunities and new challenges. And I guess it's really just asking around how to navigate landing a better job, but also really wants to get into tech.
Yeah, so like we hire lawyers all the time. I love to call our general counsel and our law team, our legal team, you know, my attorneys at law. I always go, "Hi, attorneys at law, I have a question," and they're like, "Oh gosh." Because they're attorneys, but they're just corporate attorneys versus working for, like, you know, criminal defense and all that type of stuff. So I would say target your tech companies that you want to work for and see what law legal positions that they have available, and then make your contacts. You know, look the companies up, and then there's a people section on LinkedIn, and then you can see all the employees that have that company as their current employer, and you can see who works there that may be working in their legal department, and try to make connections on how can you get in, you know, let them know of your interest of working for them, things of that nature, making those connections.
Amazing. And there's a similar kind of question here, just around what advice that you'd have for somebody who wants to make a complete career change from a sector where they have a lot of experience into a sector where they have none. And what would you expect to see from someone in that position or someone applying for that?
Yeah. So I would say, like, okay, so let's say you are an accountant and now you want to be an engineer. You're going to have to go to school. So you're going to have to get some schooling. And it doesn't mean necessarily like a degree program. I'm not suggesting a 4-year program. You could go, there's at least in the United States, there's a lot of boot camps. And I'm going to assume there's a lot of boot camps globally where you can necessarily get skill sets to get the languages or technical skills or whatever it is that you may need to help you get into the next step. I would say you had to prepare yourself, because if you have been an accountant for 10 years and now you're wanting to be an engineer, it's starting over. So you have to come to grips with going from experience to entry level. So make sure that you know you're going to be comfortable with that. And then look for you. There could be some potential internships involved, especially if you're in boot camps. I know we hire interns from boot camps quite often. So you might have to do an internship to help get you some exposure and some additional experience. But don't be discouraged. But I would definitely tell you, just you have to prepare yourself to start over. Unless the new industry has a lot of transferable skills, it's just new, then you might not have to start from the beginning. You can start maybe in the middle. But definitely make sure that you're getting those skill sets and then making those connections to help you. There's a lot of programs out there to help people change careers. So make sure you're doing, Google is like your best friend, and you're searching to see what's available in your area.
Fab. So looking at getting some sort of learning in that area. And I've got a question there on actually, thinking about those boot camps. Does it matter in terms of how lengthy some of those educational programs might be? Because, for example, you've got, LinkedIn Learning, where you can get certificates, and then there's loads of kind of 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, even 6 week kind of boot camps. Is there a heavier weight, if you like, that would count more?
No, there like, so for us, there isn't one that we'll say that, oh, this is a shoe-in versus the other. Because in our interview process, especially if you're talking about technical, anything from a technical aptitude type of
Mm,
job, 9 times out of 10, when you're interviewing, they're going to ask you technical questions. So there's going to be some sort of technical assessment to assess your knowledge. Some people can learn coding in a 4-week program. Some people need 12 weeks. Everyone is, very different. Just because you learn something in 4 weeks doesn't mean you know less. You could just be, a quicker learner. So the length of the program does not matter. It's just what did you gain from it. So making sure that whatever the program is that you're going to take, that you are getting enough knowledge to help get you to where you want to be.
great. Really good to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
I've got another question here. How important is a candidate's profile and presence on LinkedIn when you're looking for candidates? What are the type of things that would grab your attention?
Yeah, so one thing I would tell you is definitely make sure that your LinkedIn profile matches your resume. So if you have on your resume that you work for ABC company, ensure that that's on your LinkedIn profile. But we look at LinkedIn profiles quite often when we're like sourcing for prospects. We source all the time, whether we have a job or not. There are certain roles that we know we recruit for often, even though there could be not an opportunity currently today. So when we're looking at the resume, we're typically looking, because I work for a tech company, I'm looking for your skills. Like, do you possess the certain technical knowledge that I need for whatever the job may be? And then where have you worked? Sometimes if you work for certain companies, I know automatically that you know X because you work for this company. Um, so those type of things are super important as well. And then also from a culture standpoint, that also helps me, like where you work. I kind of know what type of culture that you're probably used to. And that helps me from when I'm recruiting you as well. The perks, it's to know, understand what the language to talk to you, benefits, highlighting certain things because you're accustomed to certain things at certain companies. So yeah, your LinkedIn profile is super important to be, concise, not just professional. Talk about yourself as well. I think showcasing your personality is super important as well, because I don't want to just hire someone super stiff. I want to know, what else is there about Day? Like, I think I shared with you guys that I'm a foodie, I travel. I think those type of things are super important to know about a person as well. You want your personality to shine through. And LinkedIn is a better place for that versus your actual CV.
Absolutely. So make sure it matches and align with the tech. Well, if it's a technical role, technical skills.
Yep.
I've got a question here from Paulina. What would your advice be for people looking for mentorship with senior leaders? Currently changing roles, I believe is what that says, and looking to be mentored. So she's for an HR generalist professional.
Mhm. Yes. So if you're looking to like be a CRO, which is like a chief human resource officer, you should reach out to some CROs to see if they would mentor you. I think it's absolutely fine for you to reach out to someone to see if they would mentor you. I think it's good to have a mentor inside your organization and one outside your organization. So wherever you currently work, you should reach out to the senior person to see if they have time to mentor you, and then reach out to someone outside, because the one inside is going to help you. There's mentors and then there's sponsors. They have a seat at the
Absolutely.
table, so they can help say Day is ready for the next challenge. I've been mentoring her. They can talk to you about the things they see that you're doing well, things that you may not be doing well. And then the person on the outside can give you a different perspective because they're on the outside looking in. And so I think it's good to have two, one inside your organization and one on the outside.
Great. Hope that helps, Paulina. And we've got another question. There's so many coming through. When applying for roles, this is actually an interesting one. Do recruiters prefer LinkedIn easy to apply or more traditionally applying on the company websites? I don't know whether you guys use LinkedIn for your roles as well as your
We
own
do.
website.
No preference. There's no preference as long as we can see your where you work, your history, your skills. There's no preference.
Good to know. And there is one from Somion, imposter syndrome, just kind of overcoming that, saying that they literally take any job offer and pay because they feel like they're just starting out in their career and don't have enough value, or feel like they can offer much in the role.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is real. I talked about it. I mean, I've been in talent acquisition space for as long as I have been, and sometimes I have it within my own self. I don't, I'm like nervous and I'm like, am I ready? I don't, I question everything. And I had someone pull my coattail to say, imposter syndrome, you're ready. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it is a real thing. And you have to realize, and this is where your mentors come into play. You have to realize where you have strengths, where you have areas of opportunity. And just because you have areas of opportunity does not mean you're not ready for the next step. And no one is going to come into a job perfect. And that's the thing that you have to wrap your head around. There's going to be room for growth, because if you come into a job perfect, how long are you going to be there? You're going to be bored, right? Like, you got this, you're going to come in day one, and probably within 30 days, you're going to be like, okay, what's next? So you have to have room to grow in a role. And don't let that frighten you and make you think that you can't take on new and added responsibilities, a new challenge, a new role. You have to get some confidence from somewhere. Pull that in, and don't be afraid to ask people. Ask your peers. Get some 360 feedback on yourself. Ask your peers. Ask them, if you have people that report into you, ask them. Get their honest opinion and perspective on how you lead. How is it to work with you? How are you as a teammate? Those type of things, because it helps you get an understanding of things you need to work on, or things that are working really well.
Great. And I would also add, just actually coming back to what Dave was saying earlier, because you said about taking pretty much any role that kind of comes your way, and just thinking about those personal values, what it is that you want to do, and feel free to say no and take a risk, because your value is going to be there and you will always find something. So you don't always need to feel like you're being pushed from pillar to post, and taking those risks can be phenomenal and a good way to explore what's good for you, rather than what's good for everyone else.
Exactly, Lynn.
And we're just reaching time, but I did want to ask one final really quick question that's come in. Yes. Do recruiters frown upon moving down? So for example, going down to entry level or to a junior role despite having had a higher role? And I'm guessing this is when you're maybe going back towards a higher role again, but you've kind of come back down and gone up.
Yeah, oh, absolutely not. We're going to ask you why, but we don't frown upon it. Because, it's going to be a time in my career where maybe I don't want to lead anymore, but I just want to be a recruiter and get back into recruiting because I still have a passion for it. And so, yeah, the question is why. And if you have a good answer to your why, then there's nothing to frown upon. So you will be asked, why do you want to go from a leader back to an individual contributor role? Definitely they'll ask you that question, but we don't frown upon it if you have a good rationale as to why you want to do it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Day. We're at time, and this has been kind of really brilliant just hearing from you. Guys, I hope you've all taken something away from this, and as you're going into the next couple of weeks, thinking about new roles and new opportunities to move more towards the direction of your personal goals, just take into account some of those things that Day mentioned, around your personal values, making sure that it's aligned with what you care about, making sure that you're getting a great offer, thinking about how you kind of put yourself forward and making sure that you don't have any kind of gaps or discrepancies between your CV and your LinkedIn, but also taking the opportunity to reach out to people, and not necessarily expect a response. And hopefully if they do, you'll be able to kind of move forward, and get some great opportunities. If you do have any questions, feel free to email us after this. We will be sending you a link to the recording, as well as some feedback, as we'd love to know how you found this. And also Cisco Meraki are recruiting right now. well. So I
Yes.
believe Ruth has popped the link in the chat. So please do have a look at those roles and apply. And hopefully there may be an opportunity to join Day and her team.
I would love that. And thank you, BYP, and thank you, Lynn. It has definitely been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.